So I recently saw this article on the Sprudge newsletter asking whether the chartreuse cappuccino is the perfect coffee cocktail, and making a pretty big claim that it does what few coffee cocktails can, which is make the base drink better. And if they're talking about a cappuccino, I think there are going to be some pretty annoyed Italians out there. Whereas if they're talking about chartreuse, I think there are going to be some pretty annoyed bartenders. So this is a massive claim, and I'm very, very curious to find out more. Today I'm going to make the chartreuse cappuccino, taste it genuinely for the first time ever, and we don't know. It might be absolutely perfect, it might be absolutely disgusting, it might be somewhere in between. And if it's not quite perfect, we're going to see if there's any way we can take it to make it even better. But it might already be perfect, so we'll soon find out. I'm actually really excited for this, so let's make a chartreuse cappuccino. So the chartreuse cappuccino was created fairly recently by Paul Einbund in San Francisco. And before we get to making the drink and tasting it and seeing what we think of it, I just want to quickly talk about this combination of ingredients, which I think is fascinating and quite weird. So it might be completely random and they don't all work together, or they might work perfectly and be a really delicious harmony. So obviously the base of it is going to be chartreuse. We have palm sugar, and then obviously a cappuccino, espresso and steamed milk. So when it comes to making the cappuccino portion of the drink, Sprudge recommend using a delicious espresso blend, which I've got here. This is the Cast Iron Coffee Roasters Eden blend with flavour notes of forest fruits, honey and toffee. So this fits the bill perfectly. I'm brewing it with 18 grams of coffee for a 40-gram yield across 2 shots, and then just using one of the single shots for the drink. So chartreuse we don't see in many coffee cocktails, although there are some, which I'm a big fan of. I'll talk more about that later. And essentially chartreuse, for those of you not aware, is a kind of herbal sweet liqueur made in France, and it goes back to the 1700s. I think around 1737 is the first time this was made. And it's a really interesting product. It's made by Carthusian monks, always has been and still is. So the two most common types of chartreuse you'll see are the yellow variety and the green variety. And these have a lot of flavors in common, and they're really deliciously complex. The yellow tends to be a little bit lower ABV at 43%, so still pretty damn high. It's a little bit milder, a little bit sweeter, whereas the green chartreuse, really high intensity, really high ABV at 55%, and this is a big old flavor profile. So demand for chartreuse has gone through the roof in the last few years, I think partially because of COVID and people making cocktails at home, partially because of bartenders really taking on chartreuse as like the industry drink, and partially due to the recent massive surge in popularity of the Last Word cocktail, which I'll show you how to make in this video. But actually one thing that's really interesting is supply hasn't gone up. So the monks in France just won't make any more chartreuse. So with demand going up, supply staying the same, these are actually pretty hard to get hold of, so I'm quite lucky to have both of these, and they're going to be the basis of our drinks. I'll put a link below to Amazon in case you can pick it up, but this isn't always in stock, so check that out when you're watching it. So the exact recipe for how chartreuse is made is an extremely closely guarded secret. It's said that only 2 to 3 monks at any given time know the exact recipe, and in there we've got 130 different plants. So chartreuse lists the ingredients as alcohol, sugar, water, plant or vegetable substances, which contain 130 plants, barks, roots, spices and flowers. So as you might expect, there's a lot of complexity in here. In the yellow, I'll give it a little sip. It's delicious, really complex, really herbal, a little bit minty, kind of aniseedy, a little bit floral, a little bit citrusy, kind of vegetal as well. So very, very tasty, quite thick and syrupy. Whereas the green, cheers again, noticeably more boozy. I'd say much more aniseed leading in here. Kind of similar flavor characteristics, but it's definitely less sweet and much, much higher intensity, and I think the alcohol has a lot to do with that. So the chartreuse cappuccino opts for yellow chartreuse rather than green, so we'll leave this to one side. And I think that's actually a really smart decision. So that's a big old flavor profile, really intense, and it could quite easily overpower a cappuccino. Whereas a yellow chartreuse, being a little bit milder, potentially could integrate really nicely. So I think that's probably a very good decision, although we will taste it versus green later. Another drink that opts to use yellow rather than green chartreuse is going to be the Naked and Famous, which is a delicious drink. The yellow just integrates really nicely without overpowering the other ingredients. And I actually featured a video on this in my recent cocktail course, which is a 50 video completely free cocktail course called Essential Cocktails, which I'll link at the end of the video for you to watch. We're pairing our chartreuse with palm sugar, which again is a really interesting ingredient. This is commonly found in Southeast Asian cooking. It's a sweetener, obviously, but it's got a really nice kind of fudgy characteristic, a little bit of butterscotch in there, a little bit of caramel. And these two have very little culturally in common. This is a French liqueur This is a Southeast Asian sweetener. The two kind of span the world and cultures, and I think that's really interesting. So when I design drinks, and I think when you design drinks, it's important to respect tradition and things that kind of go together historically, but ultimately we're looking to build delicious drinks. So having two completely different kind of cultural ingredients, as well as a cappuccino, which is a kind of Italian fundamental coffee drink. These come from different parts of the world, but potentially they could taste really good together, which is the most important thing. So now we've got our yellow chartreuse, we've got our palm sugar ready to go in the form of a 1-to-1 sugar syrup. Per Paul's instructions in the recipe, we can start building the chartreuse cappuccino. So first of all, in a jug, we're gonna add 30 mils or 1 ounce of yellow chartreuse, 120 mils or 4 ounces of whole milk or your alternative milk of choice. We're gonna add 1 teaspoon of palm sugar syrup, and then we're gonna prepare our espresso. So this just uses a single shot of espresso, so you might have another one to drink for yourself, delicious. And then once that's brewed, we're gonna steam up our chartreuse, milk, and palm sugar syrup into a kind of cappuccino texture. Pour the two together in a ceramic cup, and then you have your chartreuse cappuccino. Let's give this a taste. All right, the moment of truth, the chartreuse cappuccino. Cheers. Oh, I didn't actually expect that. That is pretty good. That works way better than I expected it to. That is a really good drink. I think Sprudge say, creamy, steamy, herbal and sweet, and luscious, but utterly perfectly paired with espresso and milk. I think I'd probably agree with that, to be fair. As far as interesting combinations go, that's definitely an interesting combination. Yellow chartreuse evergreen I think is a good shout, although we'll test that in a second. Balance is great. Although I was a bit worried about this because I thought with the chartreuse being sweet, adding the palm sugar would make it too sweet, but I don't think it does. That's really tasty. I've got 2 questions here. I'm surprised by how good that is, but is it better with green? And is it better iced? Because I think a drink like this with these combinations would be really good iced. So let's test those now. All right, so now let's do some testing on this drink and a couple of variations which I think may or may not be delicious. So here we've got the original, which is our chartreuse cappuccino, with our yellow chartreuse, which is really delicious. Now we've got the green chartreuse cappuccino, so also served warm. We'll see if this is too overpowering. Yes, too overpowering. It just lacks the elegance and integration of this. It's still pretty tasty, to be fair, but it's just got too much burn. And I think hot coffee cocktails are difficult anyway. If you have this much kind of booze in there from the 55% ABV, it really kind of brings up the alcohol burn. So I think that's a no, but still quite a nice drink. And now we've got the iced versions. So this is exactly the same specs, shaken up, served over ice with our yellow chartreuse. So cheers, the chartreuse ice cap, let's call it, chartreuse ice cap. It's quite cool. That's a pretty great drink. Actually, that's very, very tasty. It's like the most kind of luxurious milkshake with the chartreuse just coming through a little bit, maybe not quite enough. I think maybe I'd just bring down the milk amount just a tiny bit, or potentially switch out for green, which might have a little bit more intensity, so we'll see. So same drink, green chartreuse. That's a banger. So we've got the yellow when it's served warm, which I think works really well. If you're gonna ice it up and shake it, I think go with green because it's got more intensity to cut through. And I think the only thing missing here is a double espresso rather than a single because it's a little bit mild on the coffee. However, these two, I'd say are triumphs. Are they the perfect coffee cocktail? Maybe, maybe not, depends what you're looking for. What would you define as the perfect coffee cocktail? I wanna hear from you. What's your favorite ever coffee cocktail? Why it was your favorite? Was it perfect? What even is a perfect coffee cocktail? And let me know your thoughts if you try any of these drinks, which I do really think you should try if you can. So big shout out to Sprudge for making me aware of this drink. Big shout out to Paul Einbund for creating this drink. I think they're pretty spectacular. So one thing I do really love about this drink, the chartreuse cappuccino, is the combination of chartreuse and coffee. I just think it's a really spectacular combination and is actually at the core of one of my favorite drinks that I've ever created, maybe the best drink I've ever created, which is called the Word Upper, which I'll just put here for you to watch next. I don't know if it's the perfect cocktail. I don't even know what the perfect cocktail is or perfect coffee cocktail, but watch that one next, see what you think, give it a try and let me know. And if you found value in this, you can subscribe to the channel by clicking just here, and I will see you soon. Thanks for watching.